Today, we're diving into something pretty radical in the world of AI training. It's a method that doesn't just stuff a model with information, but actually teaches it how to be more truthful, safer, and more reliable, basically all on its own. We're talking less about force-feeding facts and more about building a better AI brain from the very beginning.
We've all been there, right? You see an AI just confidently make up facts or give you a response that's weird, unhelpful, or even a little unsafe. But what if, instead of us trying to clean up these bad habits after they're already learned, we could teach an AI to spot and fix them itself, right from the get-go?
Okay, but to really appreciate why this new self-fixing approach is such a big deal, we first have to talk about the flawed foundation that pretty much all of today's AI models are built on. So, what's really going on under the hood? Why did these incredibly powerful systems sometimes just invent information out of thin air or spit out harmful content? Well, the answer isn't really in what they learn, but how they learn it.
The standard method for this is called pretraining. And what that means is we basically feed a model a gigantic chunk of the internet. We're talking billions, sometimes trillions of words, and its only job is to get really, really good at predicting what the next word should be in any sentence.
Think of it like this. It's like forcing a student to memorize every single book in a massive, totally unfiltered library, but with no teacher there to guide them. Sure, they'd learn some incredible things, but they'd also absorb every piece of fake news, every conspiracy theory, and all the just plain bad writing. These bad habits get baked right into their core, and believe me, they're incredibly hard to fix later.
So what's the alternative? Well, instead of leaving that student alone in that giant, messy library, this new method gives them a teacher. And that fundamentally changes the game, shifting from just memorizing alone to being actively guided.
This slide really lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the old way, just overwhelming, unsupervised learning. But on the right, you have this new approach, an AI student that's learning with a personal expert tutor and a super strict grader, guiding every single step it takes.
All right, so how does this whole tutor and grader system actually work in practice? Well, it uses two other AI models to play these super important roles. One we call the rewriter, and another we call the judge. And together they create this really powerful feedback loop.
Here's the play-by-play. First, our student AI gets the beginning of a sentence. Then, it comes up with a few different ways to finish it. Those are its rollouts. At the exact same time, the expert rewriter model writes its own perfect A+ version. And then finally, the judge model steps in and grades all of them, the student's attempts and the tutor's perfect example. The student AI then gets rewarded for the answer that scores the highest, so it's learning from direct feedback what a great response actually looks like.
So the whole thing hinges on this two-part system. You've got the rewriter, which is the tutor, showing the student what an A+ answer looks like. And then you've got the judge, which is the grader, providing that critical feedback that really drives the learning. It's just this constant, powerful loop of practice, example, and evaluation.
Okay, so that all sounds pretty great in theory. But, the proof is in the pudding. What were the actual results? Does this thing really work?
Get this, the results are staggering. In a head-to-head comparison, human evaluators preferred the output from the self-improving AI over 86% of the time. Now, to put that into perspective, that means for every 10 responses, people thought almost 9 of them were better. That is a massive, massive leap in quality. And what about those hallucinations? The AI just making stuff up? Well, this method led to a 36% relative drop in those kinds of errors. That means the model gets way better at just sticking to the facts instead of inventing them. And it gets safer, too. The model was almost 19% better at avoiding unsafe content. It's basically learning how to steer conversations toward more helpful and positive territory, even when you try to prompt it with something negative.
Now, this chart is fantastic because it actually shows the self-improving part in action. That line shows you how often the judge picked one of the student's own answers as the best one. And you can see early on it's relying pretty heavily on the tutor's examples. But as it learns and gets better, the student gets so good that its own attempts are increasingly seen as the top choice. It is literally learning to think for itself.
So let's zoom out a bit. What's the big takeaway here? Why does this technical breakthrough really matter for the future of AI? So what we're really seeing here is a fundamental shift, right? We're moving from AI learning in total isolation to learning with expert guidance. And this lets us fix these really deep-seated problems, like hallucinations, from the very beginning, not as some kind of patch later on. It's all about rewarding good behavior, which ultimately leads to AI models that are just better across the board, safer, more factual, and way higher quality.
And there's this quote from the research paper that really frames the long-term vision perfectly. It argues that instead of trying to manually teach an AI every single little skill, it's way better to just build systems that reward it for learning the right behaviors on its own. It's a much smarter, more scalable way to build AI, especially as our computers just keep getting more and more powerful.
And that kind of leaves us with a fascinating final thought. We've just seen how AIs can act as tutors and graders to teach each other to be more factual and safe. So the question is, what's next? If they can master these incredibly complex traits, what other human-like skills, like creativity or empathy or even common sense, could they one day teach themselves?